right, so Apple is doing a week of new release stuff, and it's all headlined by what I saw today, which is the newest, cheapest entry to the MacBook lineup, the MacBook Neo. First of all, interesting name. We've never heard that word from Apple before. I thought when it was leaked, it was maybe just a code name. I would have bet it's just called the MacBook, but no, it's actually MacBook Neo. And the basics are this. It is a 13-inch laptop powered by the A18 Pro chip, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of starting storage, and it is a super thin and decently light all aluminum laptop. 2 USB Type-C ports on the left-hand side, not Thunderbolt. There's a headphone jack on the left as well, and then there's some side-firing stereo speakers, and it comes in 4 colors: indigo, blush, citrus, and silver. They all have this sort of a whitish keyboard that is kind of tinted to match the color of the laptop. In person, maybe the lighting is terrible in here, but it was kind of hard to tell when looking at a single laptop, but you can, when there's some next to each other, see that the keyboards are tinted. And there's a 1080p webcam up at the top, hidden in that bezel, no notch. And most importantly, the starting price, $599. And this is really interesting. They actually hit the price. This is now, the cheapest entry-level Mac laptop. It's the same price as a Mac Mini, which has actually been one of the best deals in tech for a little bit now, and I think this one's also shaping up to be pretty good value. Now, the X factor is how will the A18 Pro chip perform inside a computer? Now, in case you don't remember, the A18 Pro is the same chip that was in the iPhone 16 Pros last year, but actually this is a binned version. This is a 5-core GPU version instead of 6-core. But I think in general, there's a lot of tasks that regular people do on regular computers that clearly don't require a ton of power. Web browsing, emailing, shopping, spreadsheet type of stuff, right? And before I've done any testing, just messing around on this thing for a few minutes, it seems like it would be totally fine for that. I would not expect to edit videos or do anything really intensive on this thing. That would be kind of crazy. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it could handle some light photo editing, some multitasking, and just, generally be a solid computer. Think of it like a Chromebook, but the Apple one. It's like the Safari book, basically. This is it's a super basic computer. If you're looking at this and thinking, I wonder if this has enough RAM for what I'm trying to do, this probably already isn't for you. This isn't the computer you should be looking at. If you're thinking, I wonder why they're, USB Type-C ports and not Thunderbolt, it's probably not for you. You're watching an MKBHD video on the day that it was uploaded because you're subscribed to a tech channel on YouTube. This probably isn't the computer for you. Now, I'm thinking the battery life could be interesting. Obviously, it's the same. This probably isn't on the day that it was uploaded because you're subscribed to a tech channel on YouTube. This probably isn't the computer for you. Now, I'm thinking the battery life could be interesting. Obviously, it's the same chip as an iPhone, but with a chassis and the battery size of a laptop, so it seems like a good combo. And I think they're quoting 16 hours right now, which doesn't mean much to me, except that they also quote MacBook Air at 18 hours, so it should be in the same ballpark. So why do they do this? Why do they make this thing? Well, I think the obvious answer is just to have something much more attainable available. Up until now, the cheapest laptop available was the MacBook Air, and that just got a price bump up with the M5. That's an $1,100 laptop. So this is the cheaper one, but in my limited hands-on time, it doesn't feel cheap, right? Matter of fact, one of the advantages here is it's going to probably be the best built laptop at this price with this all-metal body, this nice hinge weight. Everything still feels very much like the other more premium MacBooks. There's also a couple smaller things I noticed too, like the base version with 256 gigs doesn't have Touch ID. It's just a lock button on the keyboard. So you spend another $100 and you get the 512 gigs of storage and Touch ID. The trackpad also is actually not a haptic trackpad like the rest of the MacBooks. It's a real moving, clicking, old school trackpad, I guess, but it also feels totally fine. And then the display, it's okay. It's not amazing. It's 13 inches corner to corner, pretty normal looking bezels. The rooms we're in are not very bright, but this maxes out at 500 nits, and it's a little higher than 1440p resolution at 60 hertz. And I also actually found myself thinking maybe it would be a little bit lighter since it's on the small side, but it's still all metal, and spec for spec, it looks like it's the same weight as the slightly bigger MacBook Air, 2.7 pounds. You know who this will really kill for? Students, education, and not just college students, I think high school and even younger, especially where Chromebooks have been killing it for years. Chromebooks have been cheaper and have been just dominating in education, and I think Apple wanted a piece of that pie. Now, this isn't Chromebook cheap, but it is a lot closer than the $1,100 MacBook Air is. And with the student discount, if you look on their site, this is also now a $499 laptop. So it's a little more appealing. And it just plays into the classic Apple thing. Like, oh, we offer something in the same category. Would you rather get the thin and light laptop from Acer or the one from Apple? Well, the one from Apple works well with the iPhone you have. And up until now, a lot of students I've seen were trying to undercut a MacBook Air with either going cheaper, refurbished, or with an iPad. The thing about the iPad is it's actually not that much cheaper now. If you go with the cheapest base iPad, that's $329, but then the keyboard accessory that they make for it costs $250 more. So before you even get a pencil, you're already at just about $600. And that's only 128 gigs and an A16. So now this looks like a much better value to actually get a Mac. Now, I have to bring this up. Do you remember the original 12-inch MacBook? This, some of you are younger, you might actually not remember this from about 10 years ago, but Apple tried to make, before Apple Silicon, a 12-inch MacBook. And that was supposed to be an even thinner and lighter and smaller laptop than the MacBook Air. And it was, but it also wasn't a very good laptop at all. It was running a 1.1 gigahertz dual-core Intel processor that throttled if you looked at it for too long, and it cost $1,300 still. But it was a smaller, thinner machine, ultra portable, a 12-inch display, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, and it was their first laptop with only USB Type-C ports. Sound familiar? This was basically their first attempt at making a netbook. So that has obviously since been retired. But my theory is that once they spun up Apple Silicon and their chips got much more efficient and much better integrated, they finally had the ability to make that machine, but actually good. There was no way they were going to do that well with Intel chips. And so now here we are in 2026, and this is basically that old 12-inch MacBook reincarnated. Now, I also happen to think that the old Intel-powered trash can Mac Pro had the same problem, and that the new Mac Studio is everything that they wanted that machine to be, which is why they're going to kill the Mac Pro. But that's a story for another video. Now, there's a couple other announcements this week, of course, too, from Apple. There's a new Studio Display and Studio Display XDR to replace the Pro Display. There's also an iPhone 17e with MagSafe and double the starting storage and a new pink color, and a spec bump M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro with slightly less text on the keyboard, and a spec-bumped M4 iPad Air. So let me know in the comments which of that stuff you're most interested in seeing a review of, and make sure you get subscribed to be among the first to see those reviews when they do come out. And shout out to Ridge for sponsoring this video. Ridge was started 13 years ago by Paul and Daniel Kane with one pretty simple goal: gear built better. And that mission lines up pretty perfectly with why I've been working and building with them, and why I've been the chief creative partner for the past couple years. So to celebrate, after selling over 5 million wallets and tech and travel gear and more, Ridge is offering up to 40% off almost everything on their website. So a few things I always suggest to everyone, because it's good stuff. The tracker card, which works with Apple Find My, and it has a really loud chime to help you find it when you're nearby. Check it out. There's also the extremely popular 5-in-1 power bank, which I basically always have on me. And it's MagSafe compatible too, so it just pops on the back of your phone, easy. And of course, the redesigned Ridge Wallet 2.0, which is now available in 2 new colors. These are Iridescent and Forge Fetty. So don't wait or you miss out on up to 40% off. Check it out at the link below, ridge.com/mkbhd. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now, we're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission.
As the president warned, an effort of this scope will include casualties. War is hell.
We expect to take additional losses, and as always, we will work to minimize U.S. losses. But as the Secretary said, this is major combat operations.
On June 15, 2025, during the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, with assistance from the United States, Trump apparently vetoed a plan to kill Iran's supreme leader.
As always,
The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now, we're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission.
As the president warned, an effort of this scope will include casualties. War is hell.
we expect to take additional losses, and as always, we will work to minimize U.S. losses. But as the Secretary said, this is major combat operations.
On June 15, 2025, during the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, with assistance from the United States, Trump apparently vetoed a plan to kill Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. A senior administration official told Reuters, "Have the Iranians killed an American yet? No. Until they do, we're not even talking about going after the political leadership." So what changed between then and now? Hey everyone, I am a one-man operation, and I need all the support I can get. I want to thank everyone who has become a patron. Your support means the world and is essential for me to be able to produce more videos. There's exclusive content on my Patreon as well that I can't show on YouTube. Love you all, take care. A major turning point was the protests that broke out in Iran in late December. These escalated greatly after January 8th. Less than a week later, on January 13th, according to the Washington Post, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, an Iran hawk, used a secure iPad reserved for presidential intelligence briefings to show Trump clandestinely acquired videos of regime violence against Iranian protesters and bodies in the streets. Emotive images have swayed Trump in past crises. Disturbing images of a Syrian chemical weapons attack on its own people in 2017 moved Trump to order missile strikes. Indeed, violent videos apparently had an impact. Per CNN, the president was moved by seeing videos from Iran showing past executions, grisly scenes that seemed likely to repeat themselves amid the regime's brutal crackdown on protesters. Their source also said that by the morning, after encouraging Iranians to take to the streets and declaring help is on its way, Trump appeared closer than he had been previously to calling for a limited military operation. That same day, however, Trump spoke with the Israeli Prime Minister on the phone. During the course of the conversation, Benjamin Netanyahu told Trump not to launch an attack, even though at that point, U.S. intelligence reporting had not indicated Iran stopped killing protesters. Why would Netanyahu urge Trump not to attack Iran, a country that the New York Times Jerusalem bureau chief called the obsession of the prime minister? David Halbfinger writes, after speaking with Israeli analysts and former officials, Israeli national security experts spoke with great respect for U.S. military capabilities to threaten the Iranian government. But they also said that a limited American action, like a symbolic strike on a few targets, could be counterproductive, especially if the United States were to follow up by agreeing to new talks with Iran on its nuclear program. One analyst named Danny Citrinowicz served for 25 years in Israel's military intelligence and is now senior Iran researcher at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies. Citrinowicz believes, as he explained to the BBC, that Netanyahu is privately pushing the U.S. towards maximalist strikes aimed at regime change in Iran, and that when Netanyahu reportedly urged Trump to hold back earlier this month, it was because he viewed the planned U.S. attack as too small. Returning to the CNN article, Israelis didn't believe the regime would fall quickly without a prolonged campaign, and there was concern over the state of the country's missile defenses, which were extensively used during conflict between Israel and Iran last year. At the time, according to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. didn't have an aircraft carrier in the Middle East, but Trump still could have deployed bombers, Air Force jet fighters, or naval assets to strike Iran. This apparently wasn't enough for the Israelis, and so the United States moved a massive amount of military forces into the region. In other words, Israel directly intervened and pushed for a larger military campaign. The day after the Trump-Netanyahu phone call, CNN revealed that the U.S. military is moving a carrier strike group to the region. Carrier strike groups normally include an aircraft carrier, guided missile cruisers, anti-aircraft warships, and anti-submarine destroyers or frigates. The nearest group, according to open source intelligence, is the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group that was last reported to be in the South China Sea. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the irony in this deployment. Quoting Alexander Haig, Israel's supporters called the country an unsinkable American aircraft carrier that does not need even one American soldier. In a 2011 article for Foreign Policy, their ambassador to the U.S. said Israel's presence has enabled the United States to minimize its military deployments in the area. From the Times of Israel, published February 27, 2026. The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and 3 guided missile destroyers have been in the Arabian Sea since the end of January after being redirected from the South China Sea. The strike group, which brought roughly 5,700 additional service members to the region, bolstered the smaller force of a few destroyers and 3 littoral combat ships that were already in the region. 2 weeks later, Trump ordered the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, along with 3 destroyers and more than 5,000 service members to head to the region. The Ford is now in the eastern Mediterranean, bringing the Navy's presence in the region to 14 ships. Additionally, air assets in Jordan included more than 60 attack aircraft.
This deployment included thousands of service members from all branches, hundreds of advanced 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens of refueling tankers, the Lincoln and Ford Carrier Strike Group and their embarked air wings, sustained flow of munitions, fuel, supplies, all supported with command and control, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance network. And the flow of forces continues today.
The Washington Post reported, with regard to Netanyahu urging Trump not to attack Iran in January, a key factor contributing to Israel's vulnerability was the absence of major U.S. military assets, which Israel has relied on increasingly to shoot down retaliatory strikes from Iran in exchanges between the two nations over the past 21 months, said a U.S. official. The U.S. support has come at a rising cost to Washington's stockpile of interceptors, the official said. I'm reminded of Henry Kissinger's words from 1975. Challenging the notion that U.S. support for Israel was motivated by strategic interests, he countered that it simply provides for the survival of Israel. Interestingly, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal just days before the attack, in a first, U.S. deploys combat jets to Israel for potential wartime mission in Iran. The reason they hadn't before? In prior years, the U.S. took pains to avoid highlighting how closely it worked with Israel. Though this isn't even the first time that the U.S. has sent troops to the country. The U.S. has sent Army troops to Israel to operate the THAAD anti-missile system and has previously stationed ballistic missile defense-equipped destroyers near Israel to help protect the country from missile and drone attacks. While the U.S. was moving all this hardware to the Middle East, the Trump administration was engaging in negotiations with the Iranians in an effort to secure a new nuclear deal. The talks failed primarily over an Israeli demand. In his State of the Union speech just before and his video address on Truth Social after, Trump justified the attack on Iran by saying that he would never allow the country to obtain a nuclear weapon. This was despite his own statements declaring the nuclear program in Iran was, quote, obliterated. Amos Harel, the military analyst for Haaretz, was incredulous at Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, who said, without any basis in reality, that Iran was a week from producing a nuclear bomb. Actually, its enrichment capabilities were gravely damaged in the war in June, and most of its higher enriched uranium stockpiles remain buried underground. The Washington Post observed, the attack came despite U.S. intelligence assessments that Iran's forces were unlikely to pose an immediate threat to the U.S. mainland within the next decade. Saturday's attack on Iran was a break from decades of U.S. decision-making to hold back from a full-scale effort to depose the regime of a country of more than 90 million people. It also marked a stark shift from Trump's own previous military forays, which until now have been far narrower in scope. Moreover, the International Atomic Energy Agency has said there is no evidence Iran has restarted its uranium enrichment program following those strikes or that it has an active bomb-building plan. In an assessment last year, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency cited no indication that Iran was embarking on development of an intercontinental ballistic missile. If it decided to do so, the DIA said it would take a decade to produce. Despite his insistence that the attack on Iran was an immediate U.S. strategic interest, Iran's ballistic missile program is a threat, first and foremost, to Israel. A revealing report from NBC News ahead of Netanyahu's meeting with Trump in late December reads, Israeli officials have grown increasingly concerned that Iran is expanding production of its ballistic missile program, which was damaged by Israeli military strikes earlier this year, and are preparing to brief President Donald Trump about options for attacking it again, according to a person with direct knowledge of the plans and 4 former U.S. officials briefed on the plans. Israeli officials are also concerned that Iran is reconstituting nuclear enrichment sites the U.S. bombed in June, but, they added, the officials view Iran's efforts to rebuild facilities where they produced ballistic missiles and to repair its crippled air defense systems as more immediate concerns. At that meeting, the sources said, Netanyahu is expected to make the case to Trump that Iran's expansion of its ballistic missile program poses a threat that could necessitate swift action. Regarding the 12-day war in June, the Israelis had presented Trump with 4 options for military action, according to the person with direct knowledge of Israel's plans. Israeli officials laid out the options on a coffee table in the Oval Office. One involved Israel going it alone, another included limited U.S. support, a third was the U.S. and Israel conducting joint operations against Iran, and a fourth had the U.S. conducting the operation on its own. Ultimately, Trump decided to approve a joint operation. The person with direct knowledge of Israel's plans suggested Netanyahu may present Trump with a similar set of options during their Mar-a-Lago meeting. By the end of January, CNN reported that nuclear talks were showing no progress. The biggest sticking point, sources said, has been the U.S. demand that Iran agree to put limits on the range of its ballistic missiles, an acute concern for Israel, which expended much of its missile interceptor stockpile shooting down Iranian ballistic missiles during last June's 12-day war. Iran has balked at that and told the U.S. it would only discuss its nuclear program. The U.S. has not replied, leaving both sides at a dead end, the sources said. On February 11th, Foreign Policy reports, Netanyahu urges Trump to include Israel's demands in Iran nuclear talks. but Tehran remains adamant that its missile arsenal is non-negotiable. This followed another meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, this time in Washington. Barak Ravid reported on the conversation for Axios. During the meeting, Netanyahu told Trump it is impossible to make a good deal with Iran and claimed that even if a deal is signed, Iran will not abide by it, a U.S. official said. The U.S. official said Trump told Netanyahu he thinks there is a chance to reach a deal with Iran. We'll see if it's possible. Let's give it a shot, Trump said, according to the U.S. official. Days later, on February 18th, Ravid reported that the Israeli government, which is pushing for a maximalist scenario targeting regime change as well as Iran's nuclear and missile programs, is preparing for a scenario of war within days, according to two Israeli officials. The Washington Post just recently reported that, in a briefing on the 24th of February for the Gang of Eight, which consists of the leaders of the House, the Senate, and each chamber's intelligence committees, Secretary of State Marco Rubio indicated to lawmakers that the mission's timing and goals were shaped by the fact that Israel was going to attack with or without the United States, according to a person familiar with the administration's outreach to lawmakers. Quote, "So the only debate that seemed to be remaining was whether the U.S. would launch in concert with Israel or if the U.S. would wait until Iran retaliated on U.S. military targets in the region and then engage," the person said. The New York Times additionally reported on the briefing in an article on how Trump decided to go to war. President Trump's embrace of military action in Iran, they write, was spurred by an Israeli leader determined to end diplomatic negotiations. Few of the president's advisors voiced opposition. Regarding the Gang of Eight briefing, Mr. Rubio argued that, no matter if Israel or the United States struck first, Iran would respond with a powerful barrage of weapons against U.S. bases and embassies. It was logical then, Mr. Rubio said, that the United States should act in concert with Israel, since America would be dragged in anyway. And Israel, Mr. Rubio said, was determined to act.
Israel has a set of objectives. The United States has a set of objectives. What I want to make sure is that American foreign policy is driven by, first and foremost, by American interests, particularly when we're talking about putting our troops in harm's way.
Senator, who do you believe is driving the car here when it comes to the attacks? Is it Bibi Netanyahu or is it President Trump?
I think that the Israeli concerns were more imminent. Israel has felt for a long time that the Iranian threat was existential. I don't deny that. But also, even in terms of imminent threat to Israel, I was not convinced of that as well. So I saw no intelligence that Iran was on the verge of launching any kind of preemptive strike against the United States of America.
None.
None.
But eventually you get to the point where the AIs are much, much, much more powerful. They are running the robots. They are running the factories. They don't actually need the humans.
Hello, guys.